Welcome into the Inside Scoop. We're live from the On3 studios here in Nashville, Tennessee. It was spring game weekend, which means there was a lot of recruiting action taking place all across the country. Big show today. We're going to have writers on from Ohio State, Alabama. We'll check in with the five-star flex himself, Phillip Dukes, to talk a little QB Dominoes. But first, I'm bringing on3 Steve Wiltfong to talk about some of the biggest developments of the weekend. Let's bring him in right now, Steve Wiltfong. Let's start with Ohio State. The number one recruiting class in America gets even stronger. They landed 2 commitments. It was a big day for the Buckeyes. Also, they had on number one 2026 recruit Jakeem Stewart on campus. Steve, what is the latest out of Columbus after this big weekend?
Well, they picked up the 2 commits, as you said. Tight end Nate Roberts, 6'3.5", 220 pounds. They absolutely coveted him out of the state of Oklahoma, and they love him for all the dimensions that he brings to the tight end position. He can make plays as an unattached pass catcher, but they also like that he can play in line and be physical around the line of scrimmage. That's something that they really value in this offense. And then Cody Haddad is an in-state safety that can do a lot of things on the back end of the defense. He can cover, he can come up and fill. Just a very versatile player for them on the back end. The big visitor on campus, there were several, but let's highlight Jakeem Stewart. He's our number one ranked player in the 2026 class on On3, and he could ultimately reclassify to the 2025 cycle. I actually think it's trending that way. He is looking into the academic rigors to get that accomplished because he's certainly physically ready to play. College football right now, man, you see him walking around the Ohio State, the shoe before the spring game. He looks like he's ready to go today. And Ohio State, he said, is by far his best visit to the process. And this is a young man that's made the rounds, Louisiana native. He's been all over. He's been to Texas. He's been to USC. He's been in-state to LSU. And this was a tone-setting visit, his best trip of his process yet. And he's been recruited since the 8th grade. Time spent with Larry Johnson and the host of defensive line coaches, BJ Jordan, so many coaches that impact the defensive line at Ohio State. And they said they want to utilize him like they utilized Chase Young, create mismatches with them, move him all over the line of scrimmage. And he was certainly digging that. His trip included bowling with Ryan Day and Larry Johnson, independent film study with Larry Johnson. And so Ohio State, one of the programs he's high on, and he's going to come back for camp this summer. And again, if he reclassifies, this all of a sudden gets accelerated. We'll see what happens with some official visits with him down the road. But Buckeyes certainly going to be a front runner for this young man for the rest of his process.
And they really rolled out the red carpet for Jakeem Stewart. Sounds almost like an official visit in itself, but he will be, well, right now he's still 2026. If he reclassifies, he'll be able to take that official visit down the road. And also just moments ago, 5-star cornerback Devin Sanchez announced that he's shutting down his recruitment. He put this on X that he is no longer taking visits. His commitment to Ohio State is rock solid. All right, let's head down to Athens where Georgia, they vaulted themselves into the top 10 in the industry rankings with the addition of 4-star edge Darren Ikinabon. But the big news of the weekend that I want to talk to you about, Steve, is USC commitment. 5-star defensive lineman Justice Terry was back in Athens. What do you make of it?
Well, former Georgia commit that I think you're going to have to keep an eye on the Bulldogs the rest of the process. Talked to one person that spent time with Justice Terry that said, we have a hard time not seeing him here ultimately. We're going to have to battle. Obviously, he's committed to USC right now, but they're going to get him back for an official visit at some point. They're certainly going to go see him during this spring recruiting window. It's so easy for them to access Justice Terry compared to USC. And we've talked about this dynamic on recent shows, Josh. Obviously, the Trojans, they at one point had Mikel Williams in the fold, Christian Miller. Those are guys that ultimately ended up being Georgia Bulldogs. But USC's got Eric Henderson now, Coach Henney, so we'll see if that's enough to keep them in the fold. But Georgia, they're going to do everything they can to flip Justice Terry back.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to hold the dogs off for Justice Terry. Quarterback Hoosen Longstreet comes off the board. He's the most recent QB domino to fall. The number 6th ranked quarterback in America commits to the Texas A&M Aggies. And Steve, you had in an early pick for the Aggies. I was kind of watching your RPM all weekend. We went into the weekend with you having that pick on Texas A&M up all the way through his commitment. It seemed to me like a breeze. Like Steve just nails this pick from way downtown, but take us behind the scenes of this one. Was it as close or was it as Was this recruitment a little bit closer than it seemed?
Well, we hung strong on that RPM prediction, but we were scared that it was going to be incorrect because Auburn took this down to the wire. Hassan Longstreet's dad, Kevin, called me 30 minutes before the announcement, told me it was going to be an A&M. And I talked to Hassan a little bit ago, and he said that he made up his mind about an hour or two before he went up on the stage. And I talked to him about 20, 30 minutes after his announcement. He still had yet to talk to Coach Klein and Coach Elko and officially give them the verbal commitment. Now, they were having some dialogue with his dad at one point early in the week. A&M, they had corresponded with A&M that it was going to be good. But I think that Auburn, 2 visits to Auburn in the spring, Auburn certainly doing what they can to win this one here at the end. It goes the A&M's way, and that's big for them because this is the guy when Elko and Coach Klein and them got into College Station. They identified Hassan Longstreet as QB1 on their board. They went out and saw a bunch of guys, went out to California, and this was the guy they coveted. They got him to campus the first weekend of February. They got him back 3 Saturdays ago, and then they had to sweat it out. But they're the hottest team in the country on the trail right now, Josh, after landing Longstreet. They won for 4-star offensive lineman Marcus Garcia today. I put in a RPM forecast in favor of the Aggies for their top interior offensive line target moving forward, Jonte Newman. They're in the offensive tackle sweepstakes. They had Ty Haywood on campus this past weekend. They love Michael Fasusi, Lamont Rogers. Kalik Lockett's a 5-star receiver that's coming back this coming weekend. So the Aggies got a lot of momentum right now. Hassan Longstreet was a major recruiting win for the trajectory of this program, one of the top arms in this class.
Yeah, Aggie recruiting is waking up. Watch out. All right, last topic we want to hit on before I let you go is LSU gets a visit from 5-star corner DJ Pickett, On3's #1 corner. Now, early in this recruitment, I thought maybe Florida Gators, maybe Miami Hurricanes, but as it's gone on and he's taken a lot of visits, LSU is kind of emerging as the constant in this recruitment. Dare I say they're the team to beat at this point?
Well, I'd keep your stock in Miami, Josh. But LSU, I'd buy stock in them too. I think they're in the top 2 or 3 right now. Oregon's another program that's interesting. He's going to be in Eugene this coming weekend. But LSU, he's been there a few times now. That relationship, you brought up Florida early with Corey Raymond, his track record of player development, some of the all-time greats that he's coached in the secondary. Now he's back at LSU where all those names came from. Yeah. It's exciting. DJ Pickett, when I talked to him about LSU, he says he feels at home on campus. I had a chance to talk to his dad Saturday night as they were in the midst of a fantastic visit. And he said LSU's committed to winning. Their commits seem to be all in. LSU's got a chance to finish with the #1 class. They're #2 right now in our standings. He said that Coach Raymond makes DJ feel comfortable. The fans were crazy, like the LSU fans knowing who these recruits were, and it was 5-star central. We're going to have more on that on Wiltfong Whip Around tomorrow. But he said the fans do their homework about the recruits, and so they felt that connection with the fans. But it was Dad's first time. Player development certainly checks the boxes. Coaches and fans seem to be happy Coach Raymond's back, the elder Pickett said. So LSU, wouldn't be surprised if ultimately they won that out. But Miami's going to be in it for the long run. So's Oregon. We'll see if Florida and Florida State can trim back up. And then Georgia rounds out the list of finalists.
All right, LSU fans, I got a bonus question here for Steve, and it involves #1 wide receiver DeCorian Moore. He's had insiders buzzing, Texas insiders on the show last week saying DeCorian Moore could very well flip to the Longhorns at some point. In Ohio State, they were all excited because DeCorian Moore was supposed to be there on a visit this weekend, but he no-shows. He was playing in a 7-on-7. Is this significant? Is it a big step for LSU to keep him off of campus at Ohio State? Or do you just expect this to get rescheduled down the road and it's really no big deal?
Well, I expect him to get back to Ohio State, and I think that they're in his top 4 or 5 right now. But obviously, if you're LSU, you're happy that he didn't get to Ohio State this weekend. The spring game, every spring game is like a celebration, right? In Ohio State, big crowd, tremendous atmosphere. opportunity to just get around the players when they're in a good mood, other recruits when they're in a good mood, coaches are in a great mood. He missed out on what was a great atmosphere in Ohio State, and so the Buckeyes missed out on another opportunity to gain an inch or two in this recruitment. But he went to a practice earlier this spring, loved the tenacity, loved the way they got after it, thought the receivers were all business. Certainly he knows Brian Hartline's track record. Oregon's going to get a visit in May. He's going to take his officials. Texas, LSU, Oregon, Ohio State. Obviously those are the mainstays in this recruitment. LSU's still going to have to battle to keep him. They're certainly happy that he was playing at the overtime OT7 event this weekend in front of Cody Belair and Chad Simmons and not hanging out with Ryan Day and Brian Hartline.
And Jakeem Stewart and everybody else that they had on campus up there. Yeah, that was big. All right, guys, tap in, comment section below. What did we learn this weekend when it comes to recruiting? How do we feel about the big spring game weekends? Let me know. Comment section below. Ohio State's #1 recruiting class got even stronger this weekend. We're going to hit on the Buckeyes' latest commitments, but they might not be done yet. I got Ohio State recruiting insider Matt Parker on today's video. We're going to find out if this recruiting hot streak is over or if there's still more to come. But first, Buckeye fans, lock in. Let's get this thing to 50K. Look, we're almost there. Hit subscribe for me, please. Okay, bring on Matt Parker from Letterman Row. Now, Ohio State, 2 big commitments. Tight end Nate Roberts, top 150 prospect, and also 3-star safety Cody Haddad committed on Saturday. Big safety commitment right there because we've been talking a lot about this DB class. So I want to know, is there still room for guys like a Trey McNutt, Fahim Delane, and a linebacker safety, Jonah Williams? Like, how do you see the rest of Ohio State's DB class shaking out?
Well, Josh, you mentioned 2 of the guys that have been top priorities for Ohio State for going on 2 years now with Fahim Delane and Trey McNutt. And there's absolutely room for those 2. As a matter of fact, those are the 1 and 2 guys for, Ryan Day, Jim Knowles, and safeties coach Matt Guerrieri there with the safety class specifically. Cody Haddad is a great addition. He only played in 4 games in his junior season last year because of a broken leg that he had in a preseason scrimmage. But in those 4 games, he was responsible for 5 or 6 turnovers, around 40 tackles, something like that, on a St. Ignatius team that is historically a good program, but had a down year last year. He came in and it was that jolt of energy that they needed. Great pickup for the Buckeyes, but there's absolutely room for those 2 elite safeties, one of which being an in-state guy with Trey McNutt from Shaker Heights, just outside of the Cleveland area. The board doesn't change for Ohio State with those 2. With Cody Haddad and Deshaun Stewart of DePaul Catholic out in New Jersey committed to the class. Jonah Williams is the interesting name in there just because Ohio State, for the longest time, they've been recruiting him as that safety. I know us at On3, we have him scouted and, projected as a linebacker at the next level. There's been some conversation with Ohio State about him maybe being a linebacker. James Laurinaitis having some conversations with him as this recruitment is starting to pick up with Ohio State. But I'll be quite frank with you, Josh. I think it's going to be really tough for Ohio State to really, really crack that recruitment, just knowing that Oklahoma and now Texas, after talking with Justin Wells on the Texas side this past week, those 2 are the top dogs, and it's going to be really, really tough for Ohio State to really be a serious contender in that recruitment. And we haven't even talked about our guy Dorian Brew in this defensive back conversation, who, has Ohio roots, grew up in Ohio. So there's definitely 2 more spots. I'll say that. And who's going to get them? It's first come, first served, man. That's how it is at this point.
Yeah, we talk a lot about this DB class, one of the best in America, or it has the chance to be. So Ohio State fans, let me know below, who do you guys want to see the Buckeyes finish with at the DB position? We're going to keep monitoring this. We'll talk to you about it in another video, Matt. But right now, I want to talk about one of the most anticipated visits of the weekend, and that was the #1 player in the 2026 class, Jakeem Stewart, defensive lineman. You can look at this visit one of 2 ways. You can look at it as like, hey, we're getting this guy on campus early. He's the #1 player in the 2026 class, laying the groundwork for his future recruitment to Ohio State. Or you can look at it a different way, because recently he was on the 5-star flex on the On3 Recruits channel and said that he's considering reclassifying to 2025. Now, if he does that, then we could be looking at a recruitment that comes to an end in 3 or 4 months, maybe by the end of summer, depending on if he reclassifies or not. So this visit for Jakeem Stewart was huge. What are you hearing coming out of this trip and where Ohio State stands?
Well, you look at the On3 recruiting prediction machine, which isn't perfect, but it's often pretty accurate. LSU is the heavy favorite for Jakeem Stewart right now, and that checks out. He's a Louisiana kid. He's been to LSU half a dozen times at least, has great relationships there, but Ohio State did a lot to move the needle this weekend, Josh. I'm sure you read the report from Steve Wiltfong just about the visit and how Jakeem Stewart said this was the best visit by far. And then he doubled down on the comment by far. That's pretty telling to me. Now, he was still on the visit while some of these comments were made. So that post-visit glow hadn't even started yet. That was just visit glow that we're talking about here. But the biggest thing to me that in that report, and I was reading that and then was talking to some people Sunday about this, is that Jakeem Stewart, he's planning to get back to Ohio State. He wants to get back in June. Mm-hmm. Maybe he will camp at Ohio State, giving him the opportunity to work with, defensive line coach Larry Johnson, one of the most respected position coaches in all of college football. And if he does make it back to Ohio State in June, I think we really need to start paying attention to Ohio State, regardless of if Jakeem Stewart decides to stay in the 2026 cycle or if he decides to reclassify. Ohio State has a dire need for defensive linemen in the 2025 cycle. They already have 2 right now with edge rushers London Merritt and Zahir Mathis. So they need an inside guy. You could see Jakeem Stewart playing on the edge. You could see it. He has certainly the size. I mean, I saw him Saturday, and I'm like, that guy could play a defensive tackle if he wanted to. I mean, the options and possibilities are limitless with a guy that is just naturally like that. But to the point and notion of reclassification, the only thing that I could see that being a drawback if he decides to reclassify is, Ohio State is just now getting started here. Whereas LSU, this is a guy that's in its backyard. They already have the relationship. Family knows, it's very familiar for him. Ohio State is brand new. So if that reclassification decides to happen, I don't see how anyone other than LSU can win that recruitment.
Yeah. All right. Real quick, DeCorian Moore did not visit. We thought that was going to be the biggest visit of the weekend. He's committed to LSU. How do you look at his inability to make it up to Columbus? I know he's playing in a 7-on-7 tournament. Are you hearing that it's going to be rescheduled, or do you think that this recruitment is just still needs to get going?
No, he will be back at Ohio State. That was rescheduled before it was even announced that he wasn't going to be able to make it. He'll be heading to Ohio State sometime at the end of April, is what I was told. Still working on a date on my end, but I have heard from a couple of different people that DeCorian Moore and his mom are going to be at Ohio State before April is over, which when I think about it, the spring game would have been a good opportunity for him just to see, what Ohio Stadium is like when people are in the stands and all of that. But, Josh, if DeCorian Moore does make it back at the end of April as scheduled, as hoped for, I suppose, that'll be a very big one-on-one opportunity with DeCorian Moore, his family, and the entire Ohio State program, which that could be a pretty eye-opening experience considering this is a 5-star wide receiver that we're talking about here, let alone the number 1 wide receiver in the country that we're talking about here. So end of April, and there's definitely an official visit for being worked out as well.
All right. I teased it at the top. Is Ohio State done, or are they going to stay hot? Matt, you tell me. Coming out of the weekend, as we tape on Sunday, they have 2 commitments. Who do you think could be the next to commit, and do we see any more in the wake of the spring game?
I think it's going to be cooling off for a little bit here. The Nate Roberts commitment, that was not a surprise because we Letterman Row got wind of it Thursday night that it was going to happen Saturday. And then Cody Haddad, it was just a matter of time, quite honestly, especially since, when he decommitted from Wisconsin. So I think the Buckeyes are going to be cooling off just a little bit here. I would expect the next commit sometime in June, maybe July after official visits. And I'm going to go with the guy that I've had a fresh pick in the RPM machine for, and that's Jordan Davison, the running back out of Santa Ana, California, modern day running back. Ohio State just, they hired Carlos Lachlan from Oregon. He has a relationship with Lachlan. The official visit is being worked out right now. I know he was just at Texas, and Texas is really the only other school that I'm paying attention to in this recruitment besides Ohio State. But I think Jordan Davison could be the next guy to pull the trigger and say, I want to be a Buckeye.
All right, Buckeye fans still holding on to the number one class, but who do you guys think is going to be the next commitment to this 2025 cycle? Let me know, comment section below. Alabama played their annual 8A spring game this weekend, and the top recruits came out to witness it. We got Bama Online insider Tim Watts on this video today. We're going to go behind the scenes of the big weekend. Also, the transfer portal opens Tuesday. I want to know Bama's strategy for round 2 of this thing. All right, Bama fans, lock in. First of all, hit subscribe to the On3 Recruit channel. We're trying to get this thing to 50K. Need your help to get there. All right, let's bring on the great Tim Watts of Bama Online. Now, linebacker Jaden Harmon, he just committed this afternoon. Latsier Brooks the day before. Harmon looks great, 6'1", 205 pounds, kind of what Bama has been recruiting at the linebacker position. Brooks, man, he helped his team to a state title last year, 61 receptions, over 1,200 yards, 22 touchdowns. What should Alabama fans be excited about when it comes to these latest additions?
Well, with Brooks, he's fast. He's not just a speed guy. I think that's which when you look at him, he's been kind of low key. He hasn't been to a lot of places. I think he ran a 10.8 100 when he was in 8th grade, just kind of retired, kind of like a Seinfeld episode, just hung him up. And you can see on tape how quick he is. I mean, he's fast, he's quick, he's got the burst, he's got great feet. He has a knack for scoring touchdowns. I mean, just overall everything you see about him, he's a touchdown machine. And he fits right into what they want to do. I mean, you want to have that guy that can come from the slot. When you watch his film, he does a little bit of everything. Good hands from the slot, from the outside, bubble screens, all the little things that you want to see in a wide receiver to have all that route tree to work with. With Jarman, the tight end, the linebacker, what you see is what you get with him. He's a thumper. He's a heavy hitter. He's a guy that, I like to call him find the ball, get the ball, sick him. He just knows how to get to the ball coming off that edge as a rusher. But also you see him drop into space. He's kind of like a guy that can fill in on a tight end. You find him in the slot, but he also just chases the ball sideline to sideline, and a heavy hitter, very violent.
Yeah, we've kind of seen Alabama pivot to this more smaller, athletic type linebacker. Is this a trend that you're seeing, and this is what we expect to see moving forward?
Yeah, I think that's kind of it throughout the nation. I think the 6'4", 235-pound linebackers are kind of a thing of the past. Now, if you can get them and they run in that 4-5 range, then you certainly get them. But a lot of those guys aren't able to do that at that size. These are guys that they want to be able to line up in different positions and move all over. They've got guys with size. They got Metz, who's in the 220 range. They've got Abdul Sanders, who's in the 225 range. So they've got guys that are bigger, but I think the main thing they're looking for is guys that can get to the ball, deliver a hit, and bring you down on impact.
All right, I want to move on and talk about defensive lineman Josiah Sharma. He comes in from California, massive 4-star defensive lineman, but this has been his 3rd visit to Alabama this year. He was at a practice. He was at the junior day back in February. Now he's back again this month for the 2nd time just this month. Is Bama close to landing a commitment from Sharma?
I never want to say never. I know he wants to take visits and enjoy the process. I feel like they've did a great job. That relationship's carried over from Courtney Morgan and Kalen DeBoer from when they were at Washington. He's obviously really happy at Alabama. As you said, he's been a multiple visits to the capstone, and you got a guy that's coming clear across the country to do that. One of my favorite guys in this class, because he's one of the first guys I heard linked to Alabama when the old Washington staff arrived in Tuscaloosa. Yeah. Sharma was one. Jackson Lloyd, who's another guy that's made frequent visits from California. Both of them are those dancing bear type guys on the offense and defensive line. I don't know if he's close to a commitment, but I do like where Alabama sits right now.
Yeah, it just seems he committed to Kalen DeBoer once while he was at Washington. Now DeBoer's at Alabama. It seems to me like a commitment could be imminent, but we'll have to hold off and just wait and see what happens there. All right, I wanted to talk transfer portal. Round 2 is going to start on Tuesday, and over the weekend, we spotted Caden Proctor at the Alabama spring game just hanging out on the sidelines like with the other recruits. That was kind of a weird scene there, but it does indeed look like he's going to be back at Alabama here soon. When it comes to the portal, does Alabama need another offensive lineman when it opens? And also, well, we'll get to that. What do you think that they need in the portal right now?
Well, I think you always need offensive linemen, right? They're a little bit thin at tackle. Even with Proctor coming back, they're looking at about 4 on scholarship, I believe is the number. You always want some depth on the offensive line. Just because of injuries, it's not hard to get your ankle rolled up on or your knee rolled up on in those trenches. So that's one position I think they'll look for. I think the portal is going to be very similar to what Nick Saban did, though. It's going to be guys that can come in immediately and help. I know they feel good on the defensive line as far as that goes, but if a guy's just too good to pass up, I think that's what they're going to be looking for primarily. I think offensive line, maybe a wide receiver, somebody like that, a tight end could be in play, but it's going to have to be the right one.
All right. Now, on the flip side, rumors are swirling that cornerback Tony Mitchell could be leaving the program when the portal opens. Is there anybody else on your watch list that could hit the portal on Tuesday that's on Alabama's current roster?
I mean, there's guys that you look at, you have to wonder. I know they're having, you go through that spring, you kind of see where you're at. This is a two-way street. Do you like Alabama? Alabama like you? I mean, there's a lot of things that where you have to have some serious talks. I mean, Tony's Tony. If you followed him in the recruiting process, I mean, there was reports out today that earlier that said he was supposed to, hit the portal. And then he turned around and said that was cap. It wasn't true. But, I mean, you never know with Tony. He took visits and told us he wasn't on those visits when we know he was. So Tony's an original character, hard to predict. But I think there's guys that are – anybody that's not playing at this stage, once they're in that redshirt sophomore year and beyond, they're guys that you can look at. But I do think as far as huge names goes, I think a lot of that you saw after Saban retired. I think you saw a lot of that – with Caden Proctor, Caleb Downs, Isaiah Bond. I think you saw the majority of those guys. But again, it's the portal. I mean, there's not extremely predictable.
No, it's not. And like you said, that we're still in the transition period, and the roster could be shaping up. Hey, like you said, Kalen DeBoer could get some names that he wants out of there to open up more spots for others. But just in generally speaking, how active do you think they need to be in the portal? I mean, are we looking at 4 or 5 additions or just 1 or 2 additions?
I think you're looking at a handful or less. I mean, Nick Saban, he did a great job recruiting. It's not like, even not many universities can lose Caden Proctor, even though he's expected to come back, Caleb Downs, Isaiah Bond, and not really, obviously there's a dent in the talent, but there's still a very talented team. I mean, he replaced them with, Jeremy Bernard replaced Isaiah Bond, who I think is going to be every bit as good as Isaiah was. And I think Isaiah is a really good player. They got Damani Jackson to come in. They got a lot of guys to come in. If you count Proctor, and I don't know if you count him or not, they got the number 1 offensive tackle from the portal, and they got the number 1 center from the portal in Parker Brailsford. So they did a good job of finding holes, but I don't think there's any staff in the country who's saying, hey, we're good. We don't need anybody out of the portal. There's always holes to fill.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird cycle when Alabama loses one of the most important players to go to the portal, but then they land him again. And so now I guess they landed one of the most important players to hit the portal. I don't know how that is supposed to work in 2024. But Tim Watts, thank you for stopping by the Inside Scoop, talking a little Bama recruiting with us today.
You guys got it anytime.
Another major QB domino has fallen moments ago. Hooson Longstreet, the number 6 ranked quarterback in the country, he announced for the Texas A&M Aggies. So Longstreet was the final QB in the top 10 that was uncommitted. He's no longer uncommitted. He is committed, which means all 10 quarterbacks in the top 10 are committed. But that doesn't mean that they're completely out of play, because obviously guys like Juju Lewis, Deuce Knight, Keelan Russell, they're still in play to some degree. We're going to break it down in this video. I got Philip Dukes on. Yes, the 5-star flex and the Inside Scoop collab that everybody's been asking for is finally here with Hooson Longstreet coming off the board. We're going to talk some QB dominoes, but first, hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. We're growing this thing. We want you to be a part of it, so go on and hit subscribe. All right, let's bring on Philip Dukes. So, Philip, Hooson Longstreet comes off the board to A&M. Let's take a look at the QB dominoes. Here's some of the teams that need a QB. You got Auburn, UF, Oregon, Ole Miss, Colorado, South Carolina, Georgia. And here's who's being recruited. Juju Lewis, Deuce Knight, Keelan Russell, Antoine Hill at 11, Ryan Montgomery at 15, and Bear Bachmeier, who is committed to Stanford at number 16. Let's start with Auburn, because I thought that Houston Longstreet really came down to A&M and Auburn. I thought maybe at one point he was going to go to Auburn, but they miss on him. So now Auburn's still searching for their quarterback. Who should Auburn fans be paying attention to?
I think the top two quarterbacks that Auburn fans should be paying attention to would be Julian Lewis. I think Juju is somebody he's already set up his official visit, and he's someone where originally the interest seemed like it was pie in the sky, so to speak.
Yeah.
But now you'll see that the interest is real. He's only scheduled 4 official visits, and one of them is to Auburn. And the other quarterback that I think that you have to look at is going to be KJ Lacey from Saraland, the current Texas commit. You've seen Texas kind of look around a little bit. I think they did have Keelan Russell on campus recently. So I think that that's another quarterback that you could see end up in the class for Auburn.
Yeah. Were you a little surprised about Longstreet's decision? Did you think Auburn had a shot there at the end?
According to intel, I thought that that interest or how close they were probably that ship kind of sailed maybe a few days ago, earlier in the week. You saw it, especially, I think one of the telltale signs for me was Julian Lewis setting up his official visit. I think if Auburn knew that they had Longstreet coming, then they wouldn't have set up that official visit with Lewis. So I think that it was a little bit I think they kind of knew from the people that I've talked to. And I think that it does mean that they will be going full bore at Julian Lewis.
And Auburn's not the only team going full bore for Julian Lewis. Let's talk a little Georgia, because Georgia comes into play when you talk QB Dominoes. When they missed on Matt Zollers going to Georgia could have saved a headache for some other teams that we're about to talk about, because then Georgia has their QB. Matt Zollers wasn't really being considered by some of these other programs that we're talking about, but Georgia misses on Zollers. So now who's in play for the Dogs?
I think you got to go Ryan Montgomery. He's someone who has serious interest. For the past few months, he's pretty much whittled it down to UGA, South Carolina, and Florida. And I think of those 3 schools, I think UGA is the school that if they push, he becomes the guy. But I'm not sure if UGA wants to go ahead and pull the trigger on Montgomery the way that would the way that it would have to happen for Montgomery to end up in Athens would be for UGA to say, unmistakably, you're our guy. And right now, I think UGA does still have a few options on the table, one being Julian Lewis. So right. I think in the meantime, you've seen schools like South Carolina and the University of Florida kind of step up in Montgomery's recruitment. And I think that he could pull the trigger sooner than later. Yeah,
that's another one of those ripple effects, because if UGA can land, say, a Juju Lewis, then it's just a UF South Carolina battle for Ryan Montgomery. But if Ryan Montgomery goes to Georgia, that kind of spoils the plans for both South Carolina and Florida. But then enter the picture to Antoine Hill, the number 11 ranked quarterback in the country. Do you think that he would end up in Gainesville if we see, say, a Ryan Montgomery come off the board to Georgia?
Yeah, I think so. He already has a long-standing relationship with the Gators. One of his teammates, Peyton Joseph, who blocks for him, is already committed to the Gators as well. I think that he has kind of garnered some late interest from schools like Florida State, but I think that Florida has been there. They've been there for a long time with Hill, and he's just waiting on the okay, so to speak, to say, hey, I'll be your guy, and as long as you guys give me that assurance that I'm the guy in this class, then I will be your guy. So I think that's just kind of where we are right there with the Antoine Hill situation. And I think, like as you said, as the dominoes fall, you'll see people start to claim their spot.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So let's knock one of these dominoes out. Let's connect the dots here. Bear Bachmeier, he's committed to Stanford. I think that could be Oregon. Now, Oregon already has Achilles Smith Jr. committed solidly, but they do want a number 2. They were hoping to land Longstreet. I think they flip Bachmeier. Now let's talk about, who do we want to talk about here? We want to talk about Deuce Knight. Now, Deuce Knight is solidly committed to Notre Dame. But we also know that Alabama and, more importantly, Ole Miss are trying to knock on his door. What do you think about Deuce Knight? We know he's not taking any visits right now, but what's your take there on his commitment to Notre Dame?
I think he's solid right now. I think Notre Dame has done a really good job of recruiting him, especially at that distance when you have a home team like Ole Miss right around the corner. Being able to get him to believe in what's going on in Notre Dame outside of when you look at the fanfare, you look at the Twitter and the social media presence of a guy like Lane Kiffin, and being able to keep it football and saying, hey, don't worry about the clout. You'll get plenty of clout if you come to South Bend. So I think they're doing a good job so far. And I think the telltale sign is going to be when you see those official visits roll out. If Deuce Knight says, okay, well, I'm just going to go check out Alabama and Ole Miss,
Right.
Then you start to kind of feel like, all right, there could be an opportunity for him to flip to one of those schools. But I think as long as he doesn't visit and he's not visiting publicly, then I think that Notre Dame still has the best shot at landing a commitment that they have already secured.
Yeah, and I know Notre Dame fans get upset whenever we talk about Deuce Knight potentially flipping to another program. But hey, Deuce Knight continues to say that I talk to other teams' coaches every single day. If you're talking to another team's coach every single day, at some point, you're going to end up taking a visit. So until he shuts that recruitment down, we're going to continue to talk about him. Keelan Russell, he's the number 10 ranked quarterback in America, and he was an early commitment to SMU, but his recruitment seems like it's buzzing. He had a great weekend at OT7 in Texas over the weekend. Who would you connect Keelan Russell to? Any programs that we're talking about connected to Keelan Russell right now?
Yeah, I think the Longhorns. I think Texas is a team that you got to watch, especially when you look at how KJ Lacey has been looking around. You start to kind of wonder about that relationship and how that's going. They do feel like that. They have to have a contingency plan in case KJ Lacey does decide to either stay home with Auburn or go to another school. So I think you got to watch Russell. And as these quarterback dominoes continue to fall, they're going to be guys who they may not be in the top 10 now, but they'll be in the top 10 possibly by the end of the year. Like as the rankings go, you get another year of development under their belt. You also get more information for the rankings team. You'll see guys start to flip and change. So from that perspective, I think that as that changes, so do boards in recruiting offices. So that's where you'll see Texas say, okay, well, we had this guy ranked here before, but after this season, after seeing how he performed at OT7 when the Bullets were flying in the 7-on-7 atmosphere, maybe he's a little bit higher on our board than we thought he was. And I think as these dominoes continue to fall, that's what you'll continue to see as far as the reshuffling of boards based on need and talent.
Yeah. And then we can't end the QB domino equation without talking Colorado. To me, they're kind of the wild card in all of this, right? Shador is graduating. He's moving on. There's no clear number one behind him at Colorado. This is an opportunity. If you think that you can come in and play right away, it could be an opportunity. What do you make of Colorado's QB search?
I think Colorado, every year they make a splash. And I think now the splash that they want to make is Julian Lewis. I think that is probably, when you talk about the Hollywood stature of a Deion Sanders and his pure celebrity versus that, there is no quarterback or player in the country with more celebrity than Julian Lewis. When you talk about a match made in heaven when it comes to just how you carry yourself, the things that go along off of the field, there isn't another player in the country with the Travis Scott NIL endorsement deal. So when you think about those type of things, it does give Coach Prime and the Buffaloes a real shot at Julian Lewis. But if it's not Lewis, you could see Deion try to get involved with another quarterback later on, and when you look at the lure and the pull of what goes on in Colorado, especially on that West Coast, it's going to be hard to keep a top quarterback out of Boulder this year.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. They're kind of like, when we look at all these connections here, Colorado is the disruptor, right? They could come in and we think we know, okay, he might go here, he might go there, but Colorado could be the team that really comes in and impacts these QB dominoes as we get going with this cycle. Philip Dukes,
real quick, Newberg, I want to say this. So when we talk about Colorado, and I will talk about this some on the 5-Star Flex, I had a really, really good conversation with I was in Arkansas this past weekend, had a great conversation with DB coach and co-DC Marcus Woodson, who had Travis Hunter committed to him for years before
Yeah.
He flipped to Jackson State, and he took me through every bit of that journey. And when I tell you, when Deion sets his eyes on a guy, there is no one in the country that has that same pull and same effect when it comes to the top players, because nobody else in the country can say, hey, I'm a Hall of Famer. My name is Deion Sanders, and this is how you can become like me. So when he went through that story, I'm telling you, if Deion sets his eyes on one of these top guys, and they may be committed to another school, you got to watch Colorado. So the fact that you call him a disruptor, I thought was very apropos.
Yeah, I think they're kind of the one to watch, no matter who's committed where. Hey, I don't even want to put this out there, but remember, Bryce Underwood made it to Boulder a couple times, or at least one time before his commitment to LSU. He hasn't gone and taken any other trips. So I'm just saying, watch out for Deion until the end. You guys, let's talk. Comment section below. How do you think these QB dominoes are going to fall? Who goes where? Let me know. Comment section below. Thank you for watching this video, and if you enjoyed that, go check out the hundreds of videos that we have on this channel, and also do me a favor, hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel.